Caregivers can be the difference between independence and burnout. But too often, caregivers are undersupported, underpaid, and expected to do everything alone, while disabled people lose say in their own lives. I'm Brandon, your one-legged disabled advocate, and in today's video we're talking about caregiver support and disability. Caregivers are a huge part of disability life. They can be family, friends, or paid workers who help with things like personal care, transportation, appointments, and organizing day-to-day life. In the United States, tens of millions of people provide support that helps older adults and people with disabilities live in their homes and communities, and most long-term support still comes from unpaid family caregivers. Some of those caregivers are disabled themselves, which means they are managing their own health and access needs while also supporting someone else. Supporting caregivers is part of supporting disabled people, but support should never erase the disabled person's voice or control over their own life. Part 1. What caregivers do in disabled people's lives. When I say caregiver, I am talking about anyone who regularly helps a disabled person with daily life. That might be a parent, sibling, friend, partner, paid staff, or a mix of all the above. Caregiving can include things like helping with bathing, dressing, medications, meals, cleaning, rides to work or appointments, dealing with benefits and paperwork, and talking to doctors or schools. Sometimes caregivers also help with communication, like repeating information more clearly, typing for someone, or helping them use technology to speak or write. Good caregiving focuses on support, not control. The goal is to help the disabled person live the life they want, stay as independent as possible, and still be safe and healthy, not to make every decision for them. Caregivers, when they are respectful and informed, can be powerful allies in self-advocacy, healthcare, work, and community life. But they also need to support themselves to keep doing that role in a healthy way. Part 2. Caregiver stress and why support is needed. Caregiving can be meaningful, but it can also be exhausting. Family caregivers often juggle jobs, their own health, other family responsibilities, and full-time or near full-time care tasks. Research shows that long-term caregiving can lead to chronic stress and higher risk for physical and mental health problems, especially when people do not get breaks or help. Caregivers may deal with lack of sleep, financial pressure, grief, guilt, and isolation, especially if people around them do not understand what they do every day. In Wisconsin and across the U.S., there are caregiver support programs that offer information, counseling, support groups, and respite care, which is temporary care, so the caregiver can take a break. These supports are not just nice extras. They are key to keeping both caregivers and disabled people safer and more stable over time. Caregivers are often told to take care of yourself, but they also need systems and policies that make that actually possible. That includes affordable services, reasonable staffing, and programs that recognize the value of what they do. If you're finding this helpful, please hit like so more people can see it, and consider subscribing so you don't miss future disability advocacy videos. Part 3. Programs, pay, and practical support. Let's talk about how caregivers get support on paper versus what it feels like in real life. In many states, if a disabled person gets Medicaid or certain home and community-based services, they may be allowed to choose a family member or friend to be a paid caregiver through self-directed or consumer-directed programs. This can help recognize the work family caregivers are already doing and put some income into households that might otherwise be struggling. There are also national and state caregiver support programs that offer information, training, support groups, and respite. For example, the National Family Caregiver Support Program funds states and local agencies to provide services like education, counseling, and temporary breaks from caregiving. In Wisconsin, there are caregiver support programs in every county that help people find resources and learn new skills. But even with these programs, there are still gaps. Caregiver pay may be low, waiting lists can be long, and systems can be confusing to navigate, especially when someone is already burned out. When we talk about caregiver support and disability, it is important to remember that this is not just a family issue. It is also a policy and economic issue, and an access issue that affects whether disabled people can live in their communities instead of institutions. Part 4. Respect, autonomy, and communication. Caregiver support is not just about money and services. It is also about how caregivers and disabled people treat each other day to day. Good caregiving respects a disabled person's autonomy. That means asking before helping, listening to what the person wants, and involving them in decisions as much as possible, even if they need support to understand options. Caregivers can empower disabled people by focusing on what they can do, encouraging them to practice skills, and letting them answer for themselves when other people ask questions, when that is safe and appropriate. This lines up with supported decision-making, where the disabled person is a decision-maker and caregivers or supporters help them understand information and communicate choices, instead of taking over. At the same time, disabled people should be able to set boundaries with caregivers. It is okay to say, I want to try this on my own, or I need more say in this decision, or I need you to respect my privacy in this area. Honest communication is key. When caregivers and disabled people can talk about what is working, what is not, and what needs a change, it is easier to keep both independence and safety in balance. Part 5. Care for the caregiver. Care for the disabled person. There's a saying that you cannot pour from an empty cup. That is true in caregiving. Caregivers are encouraged to take care of their own health, keep hobbies and friendships, ask for help, and take breaks when they can. This is not being selfish. It is part of making sure they can keep caring for their disabled family member or friend in a steady way instead of burning out. At the same time, the system needs to back that up with real options like respite care, accessible mental health supports, and enough paid direct support workers, so family caregivers are not the only line of defense. Disabled people also benefit when caregivers are supported. When caregivers are rested, informed, and treated with respect by service systems, they are better able to show up in ways that respect the disabled person's rights and choices. And we should not forget that many disabled people are caregivers too. Disabled adults often care for children, partners, or parents, and they also deserve support, access, and recognition in both roles. Supporting caregivers and supporting disabled people are not opposite goals. They are linked. When both sides get the support they need, it is easier to build lives based on dignity, choice, and community. If this video spoke to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments what part of caregiver support or disability you want to talk about next. So when we talk about caregiver support and disability, we are talking about much more than help with tasks. Family and paid caregivers who provide most of the long-term support that keeps disabled people in their homes and communities, caregiver stress and burnout, and the need for real support like training, respite, and fair pay, programs and policies that can either recognize as work or ignore it. And we are talking about relationships built on respect, autonomy, and shared decision-making between caregivers and disabled people. If you are a caregiver, your work matters. You deserve information, support, and time to take care of yourself. If you are a disabled person who relies on caregivers, your voice matters. You deserve to be listened to, included in decisions, and supported in being as independent as possible. Caregiver support and disability are connected. When we support both, we make it possible for more people to live in the community with dignity and choice. Thank you for watching.